Hi everybody, my name is Ron Cantor and you're watching Out of Zion on God TV. And it's such a privilege to come to you from the amazing city of Jerusalem. Right behind me are the old city walls. And we're in the middle of a series called 9 Biblical Reasons Why the Church Should Bless Israel. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're at number 5. Now the 5th reason is a little bit heavy, so hang with me on this one. And it's to escape judgment. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be judged. I want to be blessed. So I want to position myself not for judgment, but for blessing. And if you want to do the same, please listen to these words. When Paul writes to the Romans, he says to them in verse 11 that there's something that they're doing that could bring judgment upon them. And that was judging the Jewish people. Now, my friend, Pastor Troy Brewer, he has a great analogy. He has orphanages all over the world. And he has kids that literally take on his last name, Brewer, because they have no last name. And he wonders in a message that I heard him share, what if those kids who had his last names, adopted kids, began to persecute his natural kids? How would he feel about that? I gave you my name, I gave you life, I gave you a home, and now you're persecuting my natural kids? Well, that's a little bit how God feels when the church persecutes the Jewish people. As we shared in the first episode about the Inquisitions, about the Crusades, even the Holocaust, where Hitler said, I'm only finishing what the church had started. Now, this started almost just over 20 years after Yeshua died and rose from the dead, because Paul addresses it in Romans 11. Here's what he writes in verse 17, where he compares the people of God to an olive tree. He says, if some of those branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from that olive root, do not boast over the natural branches. If you do, consider this, you do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but be afraid. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness, otherwise you also will be cut off. Those are really scary words from Paul, and he's addressing a real issue in the Roman church. Now, we know from Acts 18 that the Jews had been kicked out of Rome. We know that when Nero became emperor, the Jews were allowed to come back to Rome. That included Messianic Jews. But when they came back to Rome, it appears that the church would not receive them. Hence, Paul writes the book of Romans, and he says to them, don't you understand that you stand by faith? And yes, they were broken off, but if you judge them, if you're not kind to them, God can break you off as well. He says, don't be arrogant towards the natural branches, but be afraid. And earlier, as we shared in the last episode, he says you're called to provoke them to jealousy, not just to provoke them. Now, God in his wisdom has set up this amazing cycle of mutual blessing where he calls the Jewish people to bless the church and the church to bless the Jewish people. Now, when we get that out of line, as Paul says in Romans 11, we invite judgment, and we don't want that. So that's reason number 5 to bless the Jewish people. Now go to God.tv so you never miss an episode.
Please follow Ron on Twitter and Facebook at Ron S. Cantor to find out more about Ron and his ministry. For more information on God TV and the Out of Zion programs, or to view these programs again, go to god.tv/Zion.